So about those Marvel movies, I used to love those, but something ever since I became Christian,
Yeah.
it's just something inside of me is like.
And isn't it interesting the way Hollywood is beating this drum about the return of the Titans? Thanos, the Mad Titan, Sam Worthington, who was in Clash of the Titans and Wrath of the Titans, starred in a movie last year, went straight to Netflix called The Titan, and the new Godzilla movie, where they have rebranded them. They're no longer Mutos, which is what, monsters of unusual size or whatever.
Yeah.
They've rebranded them as the Titans, the original and rightful rulers of Earth. Because again, presenting them as Titans, the original and rightful rulers of the Earth. The Titans are still around. In fact, I argue in my book, Last Clash of the Titans, that they are somehow still influencing things on this earth, even though they are currently chained in the abyss. Revelation 9 says they're going to get out for 5.5 months at the end. When the Nephilim return, and we understand that the Nephilim, the spirits of the Nephilim that were destroyed in the days of Noah, in the flood, were barred entrance into the afterlife, into the netherworld, into heaven, basically condemned to roam the earth. That was the belief of the early church. That was the belief of the Jews in the time of Jesus and through all the Old Testament period. It wasn't until Augustine in about the 5th century that belief went away. He also basically turned the church away from believing that the Nephilim had been created at all. Ezekiel, though, saw it. And this is the thing. God bless people like L.A. Marzulli who've been, teaching this for a long time. He's right. The Nephilim are returning. Where I differ with L.A., and I've got to give him credit, because without him and his book Nephilim, which was a novel that got me down this path, I wouldn't be here right now. But I think Ezekiel 39 is a clue, but you got to understand the worldview of the prophets to understand what Ezekiel was writing. In Ezekiel 39, he's writing about the culmination of the war of Gog and Magog, and Gog was the Old Testament Antichrist figure. Okay, he is the figure that John in the book of Revelation calls the Antichrist. That is the same war that culminates with the Battle of Armageddon, which is fought for the Har Moed, God's Mount of Assembly, which is Zion, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Ezekiel says, God said that he will prepare a place in Israel for burial of Magog, the forces of Magog. The Valley of the Travelers east of the sea, refers to east of the Dead Sea, and it will block the travelers. The key is understanding that travelers in the Old Testament concept, the Old Testament world, were spirits that would travel or cross over from one plane of existence to another. In other words, the realm of the dead to the land of the living. And the places where he identifies east of the Dead Sea are places that during the Exodus, the stations of the Exodus, refer to a couple of places that are named for these interactions with the spirit realm. One of the stops in the Exodus, one of the stations of the Exodus is called Ovoth, which means spirits of the dead. It's based on a root word Ov, which means medium. The medium of Endor that Saul went to see was the Ov of Endor. In fact, one of the giants killed by David's men, Ishbi, they condensed the word. Ishbi Benab is how it looks to us in English. Ishbi Ben Ov. Ishbi, son of the necromancer, son of the medium. And he was of the descendants of the Rapha, the sons of the Rephaim. The Rephaim were these spirits that the Amorites, the Canaanites, believed were the spirits of the mighty men who were of old, the ancestors of their kings. They were called in Canaanite texts, called by scholars the Rephaim texts, written about the time of the Judges, where these Rephaim were summoned through necromancy rituals to the tabernacle of El, Mount Hermon, where El, they believed, would speak words of revivification to resurrect these spirits that were called warriors of Baal. And in these texts, they're described as warriors. They mount their chariots and they travel first one day and then another. And at dawn of the third day, they arrive to be resurrected. Like Jesus, who went down and preached and proclaimed to the spirits in prison until dawn of the third day, when he arrived, except that he really was resurrected. And Ezekiel, in Ezekiel 39, says, this is where these travelers will be buried. Another one of the stops on in fact, the mountain where Moses was led by God to get his only view of the Holy Land, the Promised Land. Climb this mountain of the Avarim. In Hebrew, that means travelers. Mount Nebo is the mountain of the travelers. It's right there across from Jericho in the plains of Moab. And that's where this demonic army will fall. Now, I believe that the Nephilim will return. I believe they're going to be the demons who possess a human army. I think by this point the restrainer will have been removed. The church will be removed. So I pray I'm right, that we won't be here for that day, because that's the day of Armageddon. And when this demonic army comes against Jerusalem to try to claim God's Mount of Assembly, just like Lucifer in Isaiah 14, I will establish my Mount of Assembly on Mount Zaphon, raise himself above the stars, the angels of God. On that day, when God personally takes the battlefield, which Ezekiel describes, the travelers will be destroyed. And interestingly, in that verse in Ezekiel 39, he says, then the world will know I am the Holy One in Israel. That phrase is similar to one that we see in the Old Testament many times. The Holy One of Israel. Ezekiel 39, after he destroys the Antichrist army in the Battle of Armageddon that ends the war of Gog and Magog, he becomes the Holy One in Israel because he's on the battlefield. So yes, that is when, the Nephilim have always been here. If they're the spirits of those who died in the flood, they've always been with us, because demons have always been with us. But on that day, they will be inhabiting the bodies of I believe, this army that comes against Israel. It will literally be an army of the evil dead. Like the ultimate zombie apocalypse. God puts a stop to it. And what does it mean when Ezekiel writes in Ezekiel 39:11, it will block the travelers? The word translated block is only used one other place in the Bible. It's in Deuteronomy, the verse that talks about thou shalt not muzzle an ox when he treads out the grain. Muzzle. I'm not quite sure what that means, but if we take it in context of what Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15, that we shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. We will be resurrected. Maybe that's what God is saying. I will block the travelers. They're dead, and they are staying dead when the rest of us are resurrected into new glorified bodies.